Welcome back to Macomb Paranormal Investigations. Tonight, we return to one of Michigan's most infamous and deeply unsettling locations. A place where history, tragedy, medicine, neglect, and decades of paranormal claims all collide behind aging walls. A place many say is haunted, not because it was built to scare, but because so much suffering happened there. Tonight, we go deeper into the full story of Eloise Asylum. Located in Westland, Michigan, just outside Detroit, the Eloise complex has become one of the best-known haunted sites in the Midwest. To some, it is a historical landmark. To others, it is a paranormal hotspot. To many former residents of Wayne County, the very name Eloise still carries a sense of dread. People speak of voices in empty corridors, shadow figures in sealed wards, sudden cold spots, doors moving on their own, and the feeling that someone is standing just behind you. But before it became a legend, Eloise was a real institution with a long and complicated history. And that history begins in 1839. That year, Wayne County purchased land in what was then a rural farming area west of Detroit. The original purpose was not a psychiatric hospital. It was a county poorhouse and farm, created to care for the homeless, elderly, disabled, and impoverished people who had nowhere else to go. In the 1800s, social services barely existed. If someone lost their family, became sick, suffered mental illness, or could no longer support themselves, there were few options. Many ended up in county institutions like this one. The farm allowed residents to work and help sustain the property. Crops were grown, animals were raised, food was produced on site. Labor was considered part of daily life and, in theory, part of rehabilitation. But over time, the number of people needing help increased. As Detroit grew during the industrial era, so did poverty, overcrowding, and public health problems. Wayne County expanded the property repeatedly. More buildings were added, more wards opened, more services were moved there. Eventually, the site became known as Eloise. No one knows with complete certainty how the name became attached to the complex, though several theories exist. One popular story claims the name came from a postal worker's daughter. Others suggest it came from an early station name. Whatever the truth, the name remained. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, Eloise had transformed into a massive institutional campus. It included psychiatric wards, a general hospital, tuberculosis sanatorium facilities, a bakery, laundry, dairy, greenhouses, police force, fire department, power plant, water systems, chapel, cemetery areas, and housing for staff. It functioned almost like its own self-contained city. At its height, the campus covered hundreds of acres and included dozens of buildings. Thousands of patients and staff occupied the grounds. Imagine the scale of that. Long brick corridors stretching for what felt like forever. Rows of patient rooms. Industrial kitchens feeding thousands. Steam tunnels connecting buildings underground. Ambulances arriving. Families leaving loved ones behind. And for many patients, uncertainty about whether they would ever leave again. Eloise accepted many kinds of residents: the mentally ill, the elderly, alcoholics, tuberculosis patients, the developmentally disabled, those with epilepsy, the poor, the abandoned, and people society simply did not know how to handle. That last category is important, because in earlier eras, behaviors now understood medically or socially were often treated as reasons for confinement. A woman suffering postpartum depression might be institutionalized, A veteran with trauma might be labeled unstable. A teenager considered rebellious could be sent away. An elderly parent with dementia might be committed permanently. Someone grieving, drinking heavily, or acting erratically could be judged unfit. Once admitted, freedom was not guaranteed. As patient populations exploded, overcrowding became one of Eloise's biggest problems. Some reports place the population in the many thousands during peak years. Beds filled quickly. Wards became cramped. Staffing struggled to keep pace. And overcrowding in institutions often leads to neglect. Though many doctors, nurses, and workers likely tried their best under difficult conditions, the system itself could be harsh. Patients were sometimes restrained, sedated, isolated, or subjected to treatments common for their time that are disturbing by modern standards. Hydrotherapy, ice baths, insulin shock treatments, electroconvulsive therapy, heavy tranquilization, and in some eras, lobotomies. To be clear, some treatments were considered cutting-edge medicine in their day, but many caused fear, confusion, and trauma. Records and stories from similar institutions across America remind us that patients often had little say in their own care. Now imagine the emotional energy inside those walls. Fear, hopelessness, confusion, loneliness, desperation, and for some, death. Deaths occurred regularly at Eloise over the decades due to age, disease, suicide, medical complications, and natural causes. Tuberculosis alone claimed many lives in the era before effective antibiotics. Some former cemetery plots connected to the grounds reportedly held institutional burials, including patients whose families never claimed them. Think of how many stories ended there quietly. No headlines, no memorial, no visitors. Just another name entered into a ledger. And places tied to forgotten lives often become fertile ground for ghost stories. By the early and mid-20th century, whispers about Eloise were already spreading. Nurses reported hearing footsteps after rounds were complete, doors opening and closing in empty sections, call bells ringing where no patient remained, voices speaking from behind closed doors, patients describing people standing beside their beds at night. Some stories may have been stress-related, others may have grown through rumor, but the tales persisted decade after decade. One recurring legend describes a woman seen walking the hallways late at night in outdated hospital clothing. She appears at the far end of a corridor, moves slowly, then turns a corner and vanishes. Another tells of a male figure near stairwells, angry, pacing, sometimes heard shouting, though no person is present. Then there are the sounds. Crying from distant rooms, metal clanging underground, whispers, coughing, the squeak of wheels like an old gurney or wheelchair rolling across tile. Investigators often note that sound behaves strangely in large abandoned buildings. Pipes expand, wind moves through shafts, old metal shifts. Yet some sounds are difficult to explain when heard in locked, empty wings. The tunnels beneath Eloise are perhaps the most notorious area of all. Large institutions often use tunnels for steam pipes, laundry transport, maintenance, and movement during bad weather. Eloise was no different. But underground corridors naturally amplify fear. Low ceilings, dark corners, echoes, moisture dripping, no windows, no sense of time. Visitors describe sudden dread there. Some say they feel watched before hearing anything unusual. Others report footsteps matching their pace from somewhere behind them. Some claim flashlights malfunction in specific tunnel sections. A few have described seeing a silhouette at the far end, only for it to disappear when approached. Another major part of Eloise's legend centers around children. Over its long history, facilities associated with childcare and family services were connected to the campus. Paranormal groups often report childlike voices, laughter, and small footsteps in certain areas. During investigations, toys or balls are sometimes placed in rooms. Some say they have seen balls roll without contact. Others report responses on devices after asking simple questions like, "Can you touch the toy?" or "How old are you?" Skeptics point to uneven floors, air movement, and expectation bias. Believers say the timing feels too precise. There are also many reports involving shadow figures. These are among the most common paranormal claims at Eloise. Not glowing apparitions, not transparent ghosts, but human-shaped darkness, seen crossing doorways, standing motionless in hallways, watching from windows, peeking around corners, then gone instantly. Some investigators believe shadow figures represent something different from traditional spirits, perhaps residual energy, psychological perception, or entities of another kind entirely. Whatever the explanation, the reports are frequent enough that Eloise has become strongly associated with them. As psychiatric treatment changed nationwide in the 1960s and 1970s, many large institutions declined. Community-based care replaced long-term confinement in many cases. Funding shifted, buildings closed. Eloise slowly emptied. Entire wards were abandoned. Medical equipment left behind. Beds removed. Paint peeled. Glass shattered. Nature crept in through broken windows. And abandoned hospitals have a unique atmosphere, unlike almost any other structure. They once contained constant human presence, voices, movement, emergencies, routines. When that suddenly stops, the silence can feel unnatural. Urban explorers who entered during later decades often described Eloise as overwhelming. Some said they felt pressure in the chest. Others became anxious for no clear reason. Many reported hearing sounds they could not locate. Some left within minutes. Whether paranormal or psychological, the effect was real. The morgue and treatment areas also became focal points for stories. Places associated with death naturally carry emotional weight. Visitors have described sudden nausea, headaches, or sadness in these spaces. Some cameras allegedly fail. Batteries drain faster than expected. Audio recorders capture unexplained taps or murmurs. Again, none of this proves ghosts, but it keeps the mystery alive. Modern paranormal investigators now visit portions of Eloise during organized tours and overnight events. Common methods include EVP sessions, spirit boxes, EMF meters, REM pods, thermal cameras, trigger objects. During sessions, some groups claim intelligent responses. Questions such as, "What is your name?" receive words through radio sweep devices. Requests for interaction are followed by meter spikes. Unseen knocks answer yes or no questions. Skeptics note that radio sweep devices can produce random words, and EMF meters can react to environmental sources. And that is true, but believers counter that context matters, especially when replies seem specific, emotional, or relevant to the room's history. One frequently reported phenomenon at Eloise is hearing your own name whispered. This claim appears in multiple witness stories. Imagine standing in darkness, your flashlight off, the hallway silent, then hearing your name softly from behind your shoulder. You turn, no one is there. Even skeptics admit experiences like that can deeply affect people. Another chilling report involves unseen touching, a tap on the shoulder, a brush across the arm, hair tugged lightly, the sensation of someone standing extremely close. These experiences may be caused by nerves, static, airflow, or suggestion, but to the person experiencing them, they feel real. There are also stories from former workers who never considered themselves paranormal believers. They describe charts moved from desks, lights activated in closed wings, locked doors found open, call buttons triggered with no patients inside, elevators stopping on floors no one requested. Those stories are especially compelling because they come from people who simply worked there. No cameras, no audience, no need for attention, just memories they still cannot explain. Yet perhaps the deepest haunting of Eloise is not supernatural at all. It is historical. Institutions like Eloise remind us how societies once hid suffering behind walls, how mental illness was feared, how poverty was criminalized, how people could be forgotten once labeled inconvenient. Many patients likely received care and compassion from dedicated staff, but many others experienced loneliness beyond measure. That truth lingers. And when people walk through Eloise today, they may be feeling not spirits, but empathy, the emotional residue of imagining what happened there. Still, countless visitors insist something more remains. So what haunts Eloise? Former patients unwilling to leave, residual echoes of trauma replaying endlessly, misinterpreted sounds and suggestible minds, or the weight of history pressing on anyone who enters. Maybe the reason Eloise fascinates so many people is because no single explanation fully satisfies. It is both a real historical institution and a modern paranormal legend. Both documented suffering and whispered mystery, both architecture and atmosphere. If you ever visit, go respectfully. This was not a haunted attraction to the people who lived there. It was their hospital, their prison, their refuge, their final home. And if, while standing in a dark corridor, you hear footsteps approaching from the far end, if you see movement in an empty doorway, if a voice softly says your name, you may be hearing more than a ghost story. You may be hearing history itself. Thank you for listening to Macomb Paranormal Investigations. If you enjoyed tonight's deep dive into Eloise Asylum, subscribe, follow, and share this episode. Let us know in the comments, would you spend one night alone inside Eloise? Until next time, stay curious, stay respectful, and keep watching the shadows.